What would happen if two of the most powerful forces in the Middle East and the world, Iran and the United States, entered into a direct war? For decades, tensions between Tehran and Washington have simmered just below the surface. Military threats, economic sanctions, proxy conflicts, cyber warfare, and political confrontation have created one of the most dangerous rivalries in modern geopolitics. Today, the stakes are enormous. The Persian Gulf controls a major portion of the world's oil supply. U.S. military bases surround Iran across the Middle East. Iran commands powerful regional allies and militia networks stretching from Lebanon to Iraq and Yemen. So the question the world keeps asking is simple but terrifying. Could a direct war between Iran and the United States actually happen? And what would it mean for the world? The relationship between the United States and Iran has been defined by hostility for more than 4 decades. The roots of this confrontation go back to 1979, when Iran's Islamic Revolution overthrew the US-backed Shah and established the Islamic Republic. Soon after the revolution, Iranian students seized the US Embassy in Tehran, holding 52 American diplomats hostage for 444 days. That crisis shattered diplomatic relations between the two countries, and they have never been restored since. From that moment forward, Iran and the United States became strategic adversaries. Washington views Iran as a destabilizing force in the Middle East, accusing it of supporting armed groups such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and various militia groups in Iraq and Syria. Iran, on the other hand, sees the United States as the dominant military power trying to control the Middle East while threatening Iran's sovereignty and political system. This rivalry has shaped decades of military deployments, sanctions, intelligence operations, and regional conflicts. But despite intense hostility, a full-scale war between Iran and the United States has never actually occurred. Instead, the conflict has mostly been fought indirectly through proxy wars, economic pressure, covert operations, and strategic deterrence. In recent years, tensions between the United States and Iran have repeatedly escalated to dangerous levels. One of the most dramatic moments occurred in January 2020, when the United States carried out a drone strike in Baghdad that killed Qassem Soleimani, the powerful commander of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Quds Force. Soleimani was considered one of the most influential military leaders in the Middle East, and played a central role in coordinating Iran's regional military strategy. His killing shocked the world and raised immediate fears of a large-scale war. In response, Iran launched ballistic missile attacks on U.S. military bases in Iraq, marking the first time Iran directly targeted American forces with missiles. Although the attack caused limited casualties, it demonstrated how quickly tensions could spiral toward open conflict. Since then, the confrontation has continued through several major flashpoints, including economic sanctions imposed by the United States on Iran's economy, particularly targeting its oil exports.
Another major source of tension has been Iran's nuclear program. The United States and several of its allies believe Iran could potentially develop nuclear weapons capability, while Iran maintains that its nuclear program is intended only for peaceful purposes, such as energy production. This dispute became even more serious after the United States withdrew from the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, formerly known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. That agreement had limited Iran's nuclear activities in exchange for relief from international sanctions. After the U.S. withdrawal, Iran gradually began expanding parts of its nuclear program again. Today, the future of negotiations over Iran's nuclear activities remains uncertain, and the political relationship between the two countries remains deeply tense. To understand the possible consequences of a U.S.-Iran war, it is important to examine the military realities on both sides. The United States possesses the most powerful military in the world, supported by a defense budget that exceeding $800 billion annually. The U.S. military operates advanced stealth aircraft such as the F-35 and B-2 bomber, maintains massive naval power with aircraft carrier strike groups, and relies on global satellite intelligence systems. American forces also operate multiple military bases across the Middle East, including installations in Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Iraq, and the United Arab Emirates. The U.S. Navy maintains a continuous presence in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical shipping routes for global oil supplies. Iran, however, has developed a very different military strategy, designed to counter stronger conventional forces. Although Iran cannot match the United States in overall military power, it has invested heavily in ballistic missiles, drone technology, naval fast attack craft, and regional alliances. Iran possesses one of the largest missile arsenals in the Middle East and has demonstrated the ability to strike targets hundreds of kilometers away. Another key element of Iran's strategy involves its network of allied groups across the region. These groups operate in countries such as Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, allowing Iran to extend its influence far beyond its borders.
Geography also plays a major role in Iran's strategic position. The Strait of Hormuz lies near Iran's southern coastline and serves as one of the most important choke points in global energy trade. Roughly 20% of the world's oil supply passes through this narrow waterway. If a conflict erupted, Iran could attempt to disrupt shipping through the strait, which would have immediate and serious consequences for global energy markets. A direct war between Iran and the United States would likely begin with a sudden escalation of existing tensions rather than a formal declaration of war. One possible trigger could involve attacks on U.S. military forces stationed in the Middle East. Thousands of American troops remain deployed across the region, and a major attack resulting in significant casualties could prompt direct military retaliation against Iranian targets. Another possible trigger could involve developments in Iran's nuclear program. If international tensions escalated over concerns about nuclear weapons capability, military action against nuclear facilities could become a serious consideration. Shipping routes in the Persian Gulf could also become a flashpoint. If Iran attempted to disrupt shipping in the Strait of Hormuz during a crisis, the United States Navy would almost certainly respond to ensure the continuation of global trade. A war between the United States and Iran would not likely remain limited to the two countries alone. Iran has spent decades building a network of regional allies and affiliated groups across the Middle East. These groups could potentially become involved in the conflict, opening multiple fronts across the region. Hezbollah in Lebanon, for example, is considered one of the most heavily armed non-state groups in the world and possesses a large arsenal of rockets and missiles. Militia groups in Iraq have previously targeted U.S. forces stationed there, and other allied organizations operate in Syria and Yemen. Israel could also become a central actor in such a conflict. Israel considers Iran one of its most serious security threats, particularly because of Iran's missile capabilities and its support for groups hostile to Israel. If a major war broke out, Israel could become directly involved, potentially expanding the scale of the conflict across the region. The economic consequences of such a war would likely be felt worldwide. Because the Persian Gulf region plays such a major role in global oil production, any disruption to energy supplies could quickly affect international markets. Oil prices could rise sharply, transportation costs could increase, and inflation could spread across many economies. Countries that rely heavily on imported energy, particularly in Asia and Europe, could experience serious economic pressure. Shipping routes could also be affected, forcing companies to pay higher insurance costs or reroute cargo through longer and more expensive paths. For ordinary people around the world, these developments could translate into higher fuel prices, increased costs of goods, and economic uncertainty. This concludes the first part of our analysis. We will continue exploring the complex rivalry in the next segment.